How's it going, everyone? Cup of Anime Joe here. And today I want to talk just a little bit about One Piece Chapter 1115, titled Continental Fragments. And we open up with the cover story here. We have Volume 5 of Yamato and the Holy Inari Pilgrimage. And it looks like she hasn't even left the Flower Capital yet. Which, I mean, that's fine. You gotta prep for your journey, right? You get your money, and then after you have your money, you get your food. So here we see Hiyori and Otoko making some bento boxes for Yamato, and it's super cute. And it kind of leads well into the chapter, because the chapter opens up after that in, you guessed it, the flower capital of Wano. Now, I originally didn't think that Wano would have gotten this transmission because it's an isolated country, but I suppose it does make sense that Orochi would have had a Dendenmushi because he was communicating with Cypherpole and he was dealing outside of Wano with like the weapons and Doflamingo and stuff, and so Kaido or Orochi or even both of them probably would have needed a transponder snail to be able to do that. And so that's what happened here. They discovered the snail in the castle among some of Orochi's other possessions, and so now they're able to listen to the broadcast. Momo comments that Joy Boy is a pirate, just like how Luffy is. And because Momo read Odin's journal, he knows at least the information about Joy Boy that Odin put in that journal. So he probably has a little more context about this than even we do as the readers, and definitely than the rest of the people in Wano, such as Kinemon, who's questioning if he knows of him. and we get Damalo Black. This is of all the people that I expected to see in these cuts around the world, Damalo Black is not one of them. And it's really funny that him and his crew impersonated Luffy, and then Luffy came back, and they're like, oh no, now we can't do that. Now they're impersonating Kid. Now we got Damalo Black dressed as Eustace Captain Kidd here. And this kind of makes me wonder if it's light foreshadowing for the return of Kid and his crew, right? Kind of like what happened with Luffy and his crew when Damalo Black was impersonating Luffy. So, Kid hasn't been particularly amazing to me in this story, but I do think there's more that he could possibly do. And I mean, overall, I do think he's a pretty cool character, so I would not mind if Oda brought him back. But if he does bring him back, I really want him to be more impressive or do something really important, like make it meaningful. And, he was taken down right outside of Elbaf, so I even think that him coming back in the Elbaf arc could be a good time to do it. And we have Vegapunk's broadcast. We do have him reiterate that he only had access to a handful of the poneglyphs. And he said before that he wasn't going to speculate on stuff. So we really just are going to get the information that Vegapunk has to offer. So we still have the marine ships outside of Egghead Island, which makes sense. Some of them are sunk, and I mean, I guess they would have been with the giant forces coming from the outside. Vegapunk says that the combined narrative of the poneglyphs clearly chronicle an unbelievable history about a great war in the distant past. And this is when he starts going into the 20 Kingdoms. During that period, Joy Boy faced an enemy, the organization known as the World Government. And we're already starting to see some of the Marines have a little bit of pause here, right? I'm not sure if these are named or unnamed characters, but they basically say, wait, isn't that us? Well, he did say he was a pirate. And so I mean, the current era, the Marines and the world government also oppose pirates, but I kind of think there's more going on here in this panel, in that the Marines are really going to start to question the celestial dragons the more that Vegapunk reveals this broadcast. At least some of the Marines. Maybe not all of them. Maybe they'll end up being a split. But I'm already seeing Marines have pause from what they're hearing. We get a scene of the Dory and Luffy basically still running from Mercury. Luffy is still in Gear 5th, it looks like. And even though he can't damage Mercury, he's still laughing. Typical Gear 5th. And Mercury, like the other Gorosei, is very, very mad about just how much Vegapunk is revealing. And Vegapunk continues here. Back then, they were merely the allied powers, a temporary coalition consisting of 20 separate kingdoms. Here we get the reveal that the world government wasn't always like one cohesive unit. Now, we knew this. We've known at least about the 20 kings. But I wager there's a lot of people in the One Piece world who weren't aware of this. Marcus Mars looking furious. It looks like there are a lot of transponder snails in the Labo phase. I don't know if Vegapunk just liked keeping a bunch of transponder snails around. Maybe he had them for different experiments. Or it's possible that he did this as part of a measure to protect the snail actually giving the broadcast. So that if the Gorosei do manage to find it, it's not just going to be an easy task. They really have to go through all of these snails. But yeah, we have Mars here just exuding Conqueror's hockey and either knocking out or killing a bunch of the snails as he just makes his way through the Labo phase with quite the scowl on his face. It can be assumed that an alliance was the only feasible way to oppose the formidable faction to which Joy Boy belonged. I'm afraid that the cause of this conflict still eludes me, so I do not presume to judge the morality of the combatants. I can, however, say that this war was a clash of two opposing ideologies. I mentioned earlier that Joy Boy was born into a fantastical civilization. And now we cut to Zoe. It really is crazy that for all of the cutaways that we've gotten in the last few chapters, Oda still has more locations to show us reactions from. And that really just hammers home how big and moving of a world One Piece is, and just how powerful its world building has become over its time serializing, because there's just so many characters Oda can show reacting. We have Carrot and the Minx listening in. It seems they have a snail going too. As Vegapunk continues, one so advanced, a civilization so advanced, that it is hard to believe it existed over 900 years ago. The weapons that existed during this century-long struggle are far beyond our modern science. So, we kind of learned this in the beginning of Egghead, but Vegapunk himself, the world's leading genius and scientist, a man hundreds of years ahead of his time, still has not caught up to the ancient kingdom. We got Foxy. I've said this before that I didn't think we'd ever see. I never thought we'd saw Tanjiro again, and he popped up in one of the last chapters. And here we have Foxy on his goofy-looking ship. And he kind of like Mocktown. Him and his crew are just taunting Vegapunk, but, this is Foxy we're talking about. He clearly doesn't understand what the fuck's going on. He's just going to keep being a big meme, which is exactly what I find Foxy to be. Now, we have Vegapunk continuing, and therein lies our problem. Then we cut back to the room where Stussy and Kaku are. Edison contacts Stussy and instructs her to lower the barrier and hightail it out of there. And she puts up an argument, but I can't. What if something were happened to the Straw Hat crew? And Edison brings up a really good point here. This is something I've kind of been thinking about since the Gorosei showed up. But Edison says, I'm going to be straight with you. There ain't no point in the barrier no more when there are monsters on the island who can ignore it. So the Gorosei can all get through the Frontier Dome with relative ease. In fact, there are more people than just the Gorosei, such as Kizaru, who can get through the Frontier Dome. So it does kind of make sense that Edison is saying here, what is the point of leaving it up, right? And he states, we've done all we can for them. I'm sure they'll make it somehow. This is sad, but Edison's not looking too good. Now he really looks like he's starting to fall apart. So I don't think he's going to make it. A moment of silence for our little robot friend Edison. We see Zoro and Jinbei again, and Jinbei says they're almost there and apologizes for it. Zoro says there's nothing to apologize for, but he's going to get yelled at later. So it looks like we are going to have Zoro and Jinbei back soon. I really think the crew needs it, but I also think that we're steadily getting closer to the point where the Straw Hats all end up in one spot and are really able to make their escape. I kind of think that maybe the end of Vegapunk's broadcast message or the cutoff of Vegapunk's broadcast message, whatever comes first, is going to kind of end up coinciding with the Straw Hats making their escape. Nami keeps yelling at Zoro, hurry up, they're moving their ships to blockade the northeast coast. I will never forgive you if we get blasted out of the water after this. Because Zoro's the one they've been waiting for the most. Stussy kind of laments the loss of the Stella a little bit. She first says, that's good to hear. I was worried Stella would never forgive me if I let them get caught. But you don't have to worry about that, Stussy. The Straw Hats aren't going to get caught. But she continues, I don't know what to do with myself now that Stella's gone. Who am I meant to live for? I have no purpose. And we have even Kaku looking a little somber and remorseful. Maybe like he actually does care a little bit. So I do want Stussy to make it out of this. But I also want Kaku to make it out of this too. But I think that maybe they should defect from CP0. I mean, Kaku has the choice not to. Stussy's already revealed as a traitor, so she has to go somewhere else. But, you know, clone or not, I think that it might be important for Stussy as a character to learn from somebody, I'm not sure who, but somebody, how to live for herself. Now we cut to Venus Juro, the fight with Venus Juro, and he pulls off something real impressive here. He shakes off Oimo and Kashi, and Sanji, and Bonnie, and Frankie. He shakes them all off. He actually does also cut off the figurehead of the giant ship. But after this happens, he moves away and begins heading towards the Labo phase because he is going to stop messing with the Straw Hats, it seems, and is also going to join the hunt for the transponder snail. We have Vegapunk continuing here. The Void Century ended with Joy Boy's defeat. And Venus Juro actually also does say, how much do you intend to say, Vegapunk? So that I kind of think is what they're all thinking. Just how much is Vegapunk going to say? Venus, man, he gives us like a Mihawk level feat here. He cuts the Labo phase in half. Like, straight up. Hockeys up his sword, if it wasn't already hockeyed up. And from a distance, just chops the whole thing in half. This causes the top of it is probably still floating, but the bottom piece just drops out from under it. Enough that the freed Cypher Pole agents and the Seraphim basically fall out of the sky, out from the building. So the Seraphim are practically freed. When we get their reactions, it looks like they're not in the bubbles. But then when we see a panel of them falling, it looks like S-Snake is still in the bubble. So maybe they'll be in the bubble for the duration of the fall, but they'll either get freed by somebody else, or the bubbles will end up breaking or being damaged while the fall happens. We have Vegapunk continuing. The aftermath had grander consequences. The wake of that ancient conflict scarred the world, and those scars never healed. We all know travel between islands can be excruciatingly difficult. The seas one must traverse are so vast and perilous, most people are content to live and die in their place of birth, never experiencing any culture other than their own. And the ancient world was swallowed by the ocean. We are now living atop the remnants, continental fragments of the land masses that once were. The world of a millennia ago sleeps unseen at the bottom of the ocean. And this is huge. I have already heard other people predict that so much of the One Piece world has sunk underwater, but I still find it wild to actually have it revealed. And the Revolutionary Army finds it wild too, especially Ivankov. Just look at this reaction. Vegapunk states that he knows it's hard to believe on his word alone, but there really were multiple vast continents back then. This change in the world helps explain how a century of history could be censored. A feat that seems nigh impossible, but it makes sense when you consider the undeniable conclusion all the data points to. Within a mere century, the average sea level rose by a staggering 200 meters. So, I mean, last chapter we were talking about a 1 meter rise. Doflamingo was talking about a 5 meter rise. But man, 200 meters? How much landmass was lost in 200 meters? That's crazy. We even get a little bit of a point of comparison, or a few point of comparisons actually. A Navy warship is only 60 meters tall. So this is more than 3 Navy warships stacked on top of each other. No wonder the old world disappeared. We have a Marine notice that the Seraphim and the imprisoned Cypher Pole agents were spotted falling out of the building. So there's kind of another small mission for the Marines here. We've got to rescue them. I do think that they will be rescued by the Marines, and this will probably bring the Seraphim back under the world government's control. If there's one Seraphim that doesn't end up back under their control, I would say that it's going to be S-Bear, because it's possible that S-Bear can be commanded by Bonnie. But I think the rest of the Seraphim, they're getting slated to end up back with the Marines and the world government. And we have a few more reactions here. We see Dalton and Kureha on Drum Kingdom. We see Miss Golden Week. Yes, if you're curious, I had to look that up. Yeah, so I think this is Miss Golden Week here. And she hits us with the ellipses, the ... But even former enemies are listening to this broadcast. And we finish up with Vegapunk here. That begs the question, how and why did such a flood occur? Naturally, your first inclination might be to assume it was some kind of natural disaster. However, I can say for certain that it was no such thing. It was a man-made calamity. If this catastrophe was brought about by natural means, there would be records denoting early warning signs several centuries earlier. It was a severe world-altering event after all. But all my research into meteorology, geology, ecology, and atmospheric science confirmed that there was no such natural buildup. It is impossible for such a drastic change to happen spontaneously within the span of a mere 100 years, meaning the cause lies elsewhere. My suspicions were confirmed a few days ago when I analyzed the world's current sea levels. This will be hard to accept, but that disaster 800 years ago was caused by ancient weapons technology capable of sinking the world. And that very same firepower evidently still exists, just waiting to be used again. In other words, the Great War, which ravaged the world during the Void Century, is still ongoing. So there's so much to unpack here, probably more than I can in this video. So there's a chance I try to do discussion on it. So we get a few more reactions. I'll jump back a little bit here. We have Morgans and Vivi listening to the broadcast still, and we get this really funny scene of Morgans exclaiming, "You can't be serious," and Vivi's just shutting him up like, "Shh, stop talking, we need to hear this." And we get a few more panels of the Gorosei looking angry, and Emu is furious. We get him at the end as Vegapunk exclaims that the broadcast is still ongoing. And so yeah, this is pretty crazy, right? The broadcast is going on full swing. We have a reveal that the world is sinking, and I am really excited to see where things go next. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I would like you to have an excellent rest of your day.